Welcome to the Intuitive Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Rafferty, medical doctor, PhD, Reiki, and shamanic intuitive healer. I'm here to bring you on a journey of holistic healing that explores the science of the physical body combined with mental and emotional well-being, energetic and spiritual health. And it is such a pleasure to be welcoming Jenny Russell onto the podcast today. I have had the absolute pleasure of attending some of Jenny's Kirtans, listening to the beautiful messages that she delivers in these beautiful spiritual spaces, and the music that Jenny creates with the instruments and her voice. And Jenny, I just felt so touched to reach out to you and connect about everything that you do, and to be able to share your message and your gifts with everybody that's listening. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. It's so funny. The lights are flashing in the background.
Do you know, it's so wild today. I like around this kind of full moon energy, this kind of transition of the planets and all the alignments that are going on over the last few days. There's been a wonderful surgence of energy in my healing space. But it's meant that all the lights have started going absolutely crazy. And today it's reached this weird peak. So the lights are flashing. So if you see them flashing in the background, that's probably, it's all my spirit guides coming to give us messages, hopefully. Oh, Jenny, I'm just so excited for people to be able to hear about your story and the beautiful messages that you've come to share with us today. So I know there is so many strings to your bow, and there's so many beautiful facets to who you are as a gorgeous soul in this world. So I'd just love to hear a little bit about your journey and what your offerings are and how you share your gift.
Oh, thank you, Anthony. It's lovely to thank you for that lovely intro. Yeah, it's always hard to kind of just narrow it down to kind of one thing, or even, one label or any of that, because there's lots of little things that I do. I suppose primarily I teach yoga. I'm also a musician, and I lead these Kirtan sessions that you mentioned at the beginning, in Dublin and around the country as well. And that's kind of become one of my main offerings and one of my favorite things to offer. But yeah, it's been, I mean, I don't even know where to start, to be honest. Like,
Well, I suppose I love how you've woven your voice and your music and these beautiful qualities as a musician in life into your spiritual practice and how you share that with the world.
mm,
And obviously you're a yogi as well, so you kind of have a deep understanding of the yogic practices too. So I'd love to just hear how all of the threads, I suppose, have come together
yeah,
to kind of create this beautiful tapestry of offerings.
yeah. Well, it's funny you use that word to weave, because that's one translation of the word tantra, and that is kind of the background that I come from with the yogic practices that I practice and share is traditional tantra katha practices, and I love the idea or the concept of weaving because I feel like I've kind of been doing that my whole life in various different ways with, between all the varied interests that I have, and that the framework of yoga and the framework of the tantric philosophy kind of gave me, it's almost like it gave me permission to do that, because I think before that I was always like, oh, I need to find one thing and just do that, and have a niche, and that's my thing, and that's all I can do. But I know myself well enough to be like, I don't think I'd be happy if I was to ever just do one thing, for the rest of my life. So that's why it's really important to me to have that kind of ability to weave and to thread all of this together. And in Kirtan, we're using sacred sound and chanting Sanskrit mantra, which obviously stems from the yoga tradition, and that was my kind of avenue into it, was through practicing yoga and doing teacher trainings abroad and coming across Kirtan. And I'd always been a musician in my life before that, before yoga ever became a thing for me. I was always a singer, and I sang Oscuelga a lot of the time in Irish, and that was very much my path before yoga entered in. And then there was a period of a couple of years where I didn't really sing at all. Was in a band, left the band, went traveling to do the trainings and stuff. And yeah, there was a few years where I didn't really sing, and I think I was very much still searching and trying to find and figure out who I was and like what had happened and all the things. And yeah, I think I came across it was like a yoga studio that had a kirtan event on, and I just thought, yeah, I'll go to that. I like music and I like yoga, so of course I like this. And yeah, it blew me away, and it blew my heart open. And I think it very quickly was like, when you get a spark of something, like you don't really know what it is yet, but there was like, this is something I need to follow. Um,
Yeah.
and I've just been kind of doing that since. So
Ever since. That's amazing. Like there's so many pieces of what you just said there. I'm like, oh God, yeah, that's totally. I just understand what you're saying with regard to. I suppose it's this dance. Even working as a doctor or trained as a doctor, I just love the science of the body. Like I absolutely love the body, the physical body, and how it works and how magical the body is. But I also absolutely love all the shamanic work as well. I love all the trauma based talking work. Like, and sometimes when I lean really, really heavy into one aspect of it, I'm kind of like, well, what about the other pieces too?
hmm.
So I love that you're kind of talking about actually, why can't we hold space for all the different parts
Yeah,
of who we are?
and that again is the essence of tantra. It's holding all of it, and creating a kind of a holding field where all of it can exist, and
Wow.
also generating and building the capacity within our nervous system, within our life, to actually hold that, and to not think I just have to do one or the other. um,
Yeah.
and that's one way of looking at it, but it's also being able to hold kind of the vast spectrum of life in general, between light and dark, and the whole
Mm.
spectrum of emotion. And yeah, I feel like it's all interrelated, and that holistic view of life is that we're not supposed to stay the same. We're not supposed to just do the one thing. We're not supposed to stay static. And
Mm.
have grown up in a generation where we're lucky enough to have choices and to have options, and to kind of be able to change direction if we want, and explore new things. And I think that's something I'm always really grateful for, because I know that generations previous to me maybe didn't have that, and didn't realize that that was possible. It was kind of just go to
Yeah.
college, get a job, that's it, and you kind of stayed in that. And
Yeah.
we're starting to see now that, like, it doesn't have to be the case. If you feel like you want to change direction at any stage, it's never too late. And yeah, I don't know why that just
Yeah.
came out, but it did.
I love it. Well, it's so, so accurate, actually. And I suppose if you look at the world around us, it's constantly evolving and changing. Look at the seasons.
Mm,
Like nothing is static. And every person that comes through the door here at the practice, when kind of anxiety and low mood starts to creep in, and I'm saying to them, well, what parts of your life are you unhappy with? It usually is something that they've been doing, and they're like, I've never been happy in this. Like, I had a beautiful client through today that said, actually, from the first day I started this 9 years ago, it's never brought me joy. But actually, it's because there was this deep sense of, but I feel I'm failing if I step away from it.
mm,
And it's kind of like this conditioning by society of, you don't change things, you stay in that now.
mm.
And it's leaning into that fear of kind of disappointment, or this fear of failure, to actually explore what our destiny holds. The fear holds the magic, doesn't it, if you lean into it?
Yeah, but it's also in terms of health, and the body. And
Yeah.
if we continue doing the same things, eating the same things, even if it's healthy food, there's this whole,
Mm,
you can have too much of anything, and become attached to anything, even if it is a quote unquote healthy habit. Because what
mm,
happens is that we just go into autopilot, and we're not actually feeling into the needs of the moment. And that is the gift that yoga and these practices help us to build, is also the ability to read the needs of the moment and to actually be able to act accordingly instead of going into that safety autopilot thing of I'm just going to do this because that's what I'm supposed to have and that's what I'm supposed to do. Because that there's a disconnect in that, you know. Um, those
Yeah.
being able to generate the safety to kind of drop in every moment as things change and fluctuate because they always will. Um,
Yeah.
and that's the beauty of what these practices help us to build as well.
That's so true. It's so true. And even if you look at the bugs that live in our gut as well, like the research that they've done on the gut microbiome on some of the tribes from Tanzania, they have the most diverse microbiomes. They've no kind of chronic disease that we do here in the Western world. The bugs thrive on this cyclical, seasonal intake of different fibers in the diet.
Mm.
So actually, there's a really diverse microbiome that keeps them really happy and healthy because it's a constant ebb and a flow of what's being fed
Yeah,
to the gut.
yeah.
So I really, really love that because actually the way we work and live and do our lives in society these days, like most people will go in, they'll buy the same 4 or 5 fruit and veg that wouldn't be grown at that time of the year, but it's been imported from somewhere, you know, and we stick to the same rigid rules about how we exist.
Hmm.
But actually, in the world around us that lives more in touch with the land and the harmony of the world around them, the seasonal ebbs and flows, the shifts and the changes, they're healthy. There's no chronic disease,
Yeah.
you
And
know?
it reminds me, just as you're speaking there, of Ayurveda and, you know, yoga's kind of sister science, it's sometimes called, where we're looking at the health and nutritional side, but also lifestyle factors of a yogic
Mm,
practice, and very much is working with the seasons and locally sourced organic food, and working with your own constitution individually to kind of generate the most the best state of balance that you can as the outer environment shifts and changes. So again, it's that
mm.
generating the ability to kind of read the needs of the moment. And like that's the I just keep coming back to that in anything I share or teach. I'm like, it's not about yoga is not about flexibility or anything like that. It's actually about getting to know the needs of the moment and being able to meet them more and more effectively as we progress, and coming more and more into relationship with the ever changing needs of every moment, no matter what's going on around us.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. And I suppose to do that, we have to be in touch with our body so it can actually inform us,
Yeah.
you know, and we've become so disconnected from the body. There's so many things in the world around us now that can actually just it pulls us further and further away from the body, in fact.
Hmm.
And I just love this kind of this feeling of, well, come back to the body, trust the body. What's the body telling you is the next step,
Yeah.
you know?
Exactly. And you know, for years I had no concept of that. You know, my whole journey basically began from having an eating disorder and being completely disconnected from my body. And so yoga was a kind of a way to start to generate that slow connection again. But it takes so long, and it's a very gradual thing
Yeah.
that I'm all continuously deepening and growing into relationship with.
I love that. I absolutely love how you've said there this relationship
Mm.
with the body, and it's something that you're cultivating over time. It's like any other relationship in our lives. It takes work and it takes effort, and going into kind of right relation with it, and going on a journey with actually have your needs changed today? What are your needs now? Constantly speaking to the body and being like, okay, well, if something shifted, tell me, you know?
Exactly. Like you don't get angry at the weather for like being snowy one moment and hailstones the next, and like, well, we might, but it's kind of this, you just accept it. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's happening now. We might as well meet that and put an umbrella up, or you know, there's things in nature like that we don't question, but when it's our own body, it's like we have to stay the same. Why isn't my body reacting the same way it always did? You know, without taking into account
Yeah.
like the changing factors of all the different things in life that can fluctuate and change. So yeah, it
Yeah.
all impacts everything. Everything is impacted by everything else.
I love that. Oh, the interconnectivity, isn't
Hmm.
it? And so I know when I started out doing yoga, it was many years ago, and I basically was doing it to from a mindfulness based practice and a flexibility and a movement practice. And I didn't actually realize when I started going to yoga classes the depth of the teachings of yoga. And I know a lot of clients that come in are they're unaware of how deep it goes. They think it's just the different postures and stuff. And I'd love for you to speak into your training, all the different limbs of kind of what you've learned and what it entails to be a part of such a beautiful tradition that spanned, like, it's wild how far back it goes. And I'd just love to hear your journey with it.
Yeah. Um, well, I mean, like you said, it's so vast, so it's kind of hard to know
Yes, yeah.
where to start. But I suppose, my yoga journey did start very physically as well. Like I said, I was very much, exercise based. I thought that's all it was. I had no concept really of more than that. But I think some part of me did. Do you know that kind of a way? Like there was a part of me that was like, yeah, I'm doing this for the movement. But then I think, there was a part of me that was also really drawn to the kind of more subtle spiritual aspects as well that I just didn't really have language for at that point. And yoga gave me a language, I suppose. It gave me a way of interacting with my world in a way that made sense to me, and it kind of provided me with a framework, particularly the traditional tantric hatha yoga side of things, where we're looking at Samkhya philosophy and the kind of non-dual Shaiva tantra teachings, and the framework of that, it just provides such a beautiful kind of overview of everything in existence, of the reasons that we're here, and like it answers, or gave me anyway, answers for all those big questions that I was kind of terrified to ask. And it just, it's one way of looking at things, it's one view, and that's all it ever is. And any teacher that you speak to will hopefully say that it is just one way of interpreting the cosmos and the universe, and there's particular terminology that's used. We've got Shiva, Shakti, Purusha, Prakriti, all these different words that are used to denote the different expressions of energy as it moves and evolves and changes through life and through kind of consciousness coming into matter. And for me, it made sense. It gave me a framework, it gave me something to work from, and it also gave me a framework to place the teachings of yoga that I'd already learned into, aka like the asana, the movement, pranayama, and meditation. And it just gave me such a beautiful, yeah, landing place to come back to. um,
Mhm.
and the teachings are vast. There are so many ancient texts that you can spend your whole life basically studying and
Yeah.
continuing to learn, and every time you return to one of them, you learn, you understand it in a new way. It's kind of like the spiral coming back around. You can work with one sutra for 10 years and continue to come back around to it and embody it and understand it in new ways all the time, and one mantra the same way. um, and
Mm.
it's something that I just keep coming back to. And then the more that I deepen my connection now back to this land, back to Ireland, because my background, again, I did a master's in Irish when I was in college, and so I was very much rooted in the, like, Irish cultural history and everything like that. And then going away and kind of having that experience of and learning about myself through the lens of yoga and the framework of those ancient teachings that are still so intact and so present and so kind of alive, that naturally it's made me start to look at my own land and country and language and wonder, like, where surely we had something like that at some point in history, maybe, who knows. And yeah, there, surely enough, there are threads. It's not very concise. There's no kind of body of work, let's say, or like most of the evidence or sources that we would have had for things like the druids and the kind of sorcerers who would have been said to kind of have been in existence pre-Christianity and all that. There's not really much that we can go on, but there's certain kind of things and words and texts that are still there that we can kind of look to. But again, it's not a kind of concise body of work the way that yoga would be. And that, even that word, like, some of those words kind of conjure up strange kind of connotations for people sometimes. So it's helpful just to think of it as kind of nature based spirituality, maybe,
Mm,
or some, a way of interacting with your world that is based in nature and deep presencing within the body mind,
mm,
and that, again, it's
absolutely.
kind of tantric in the way that it is expressed.
Mm,
And so I started to kind of feel that there may have been correlations between some of the kind of tantric based teachings and Ayurveda, and because Ayurveda is really just based on the elements, we're working with the five elements and eating in accordance to those elements, and working with them in different ways. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. And one of my teachers has said something along the lines of, most indigenous, or all indigenous cultures in their essence, were tantric originally. Which really, again, is just speaking to that connection to the land, that working with the elements, working with nature, having practices that were more than likely based in breathing and kind of incantating or chanting in some way in community. And so it doesn't have to be this kind of otherworldly magical thinking that we need to do when we go into that world. It's more so just thinking like, oh yeah, that was probably just what people did. It wasn't.
mm.
Yeah,
As part of
kind of
society.
like it's kind of like if you speak to any Indian people about yoga, like older generations, that I've heard some teachers say that, like, yeah, it was just their father just got up and chanted mantra every morning, and they didn't question it. It wasn't it wasn't like, oh, he's doing his practice. Oh, it's more just, yes, that's the way it is. And I just
A
feel
part of
like
being.
yeah, exactly. And I think it's important to kind of keep kind of a rational approach to things sometimes as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's so interesting, isn't it? That within that beautiful societal culture, it was just part of the day to day, you know? And it's crazy because I suppose coming from a medical academic background, I always had such a logical way of thinking about things in a lot of ways, you know. But there is something about leaning into the magic of the world around us that's just brought so much joy to my life
Mhm.
in loads of ways too. Um, and so even when you were talking about the alchemy of the druids and all the things that came before, I love thinking about all these things from a magical perspective. Just because my on the day to day, talking about kind of blood variables and all these things that people come through to me on a more intuitive health element,
Mm.
it's very practical. um and yeah, for some reason, so I absolutely love what you're saying about finding what works for you on the journey, with regard to actually how can you connect with the teachings, and how can you connect um with integrating it into where you're at on that stage of your journey, you know. Because I think back when I started, it was definitely very much it's been a journey for sure. um and now I'm at the space where I just look for the magic in every flower. I look for the magic and the alchemy and everything around me. I'm like, universe, show me all the magic. But that hasn't always been the way for me, you know.
Yeah, yeah, and that is,
Yeah.
again, that's another thing that we aim to kind of foster within tantric practice, is that, like, sensitivity to that, the magic in the mundane, essentially. Like, we
Mm.
could use all these words like tantra and magic and everything, or we could look at someone like Patrick Kavanagh, who wrote about the potato pits being white with frost and how beautiful that was. And it's like,
Mm.
oh, like, for me, that's just everything. And it's so
Yeah.
simple and it's so profound all at the same time. And I
Yes.
don't know.
Yeah.
There's so much magic in that for me. And I remember the first time hearing that poem, I was like in tears. And I didn't really know why. I had no concept of why I was so emotional reading it. It was like, this is what we've forgotten. This is what we should be reconnecting with, this is simplicity of things. And one of the things that we work with in practice in these teachings is developing pranic sensitivity. So the ability to become a little bit more sensitive to prana, essentially, which is just life force energy. And through that sensitivity, then you start to, like I said, just notice those things a little bit more. And there's this capacity that you build to come into relationship with those really simple, really mundane things, and they take on this quality of just pure magic. Like if we can be as welcoming and as present with all of our own inner workings and emotions as we can, then naturally that's going to start to spill out into the way that we perceive other things around us. um, and it's
Mm.
just it's just fostering like that, it's intimacy in a different way. Again, there's lots of connotations to that word as well, but intimacy can just be, like you said, that beauty of a little flower that you're just staring at and you're like, this is the most profound thing I've ever witnessed. And it's intimate in a way.
Yes, I love that. It's almost like what you're speaking into, it being very grounded in it, but seeing the magic in simplicity of just these things in the world around you.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Do you know, it's so interesting you speak about sensitivity actually, because a lot of people that I'm seeing over the last few months, and even I've been on a journey with it myself with regard to people come through and they're kind of saying, oh, I was told when I was younger that I was too sensitive. So actually, they vilify that part of themselves when actually that is such a precious gift. It's a gift to be sensitive.
Mhm.
It's such a
Yeah.
gift. So, for anybody listening, if you've ever been told that you're too sensitive, just honor that beautiful gift you've been given, because I think sensitivity allows us, like you're saying, to be able to perceive what some would say is mundane as magic, and to be able to feel the life force energy. It takes sensitivity to be able to do that.
Yeah, and it's just the world that would have us, desensitized from life in order to become numbed out, so that we don't feel things, so that we don't react to very, very bad things in the world, and that we remain
Yeah.
compliant and all this kind of stuff. So, yeah, like on some level, you know, resensitization to all of this, to yourself and to your inner world and to your emotions and everything, like it is a form of kind of activism almost, to really start to reclaim that within ourselves. Because if you think of a population of people who can actually feel, and who are connected to their hearts, and who are connected to an idea of right and wrong, good and bad, and who can act on that, then the world would be a very different place to the way it is now, because so many people are just numbed out, running around, with addictions to all sorts of different things. And it's kind of this continual projection outwards rather than turning in. um, and
Yeah.
the resensitization is a really crucial step on any of these kind of spiritual paths, whatever practices you're doing.
Oh, that is so true. I hear so many times each day when I bring people into the body on some of the energetic work that I do, I'm like, what do you feel? And most people say to me, I feel numb.
Mm.
I feel numb. And it's something I hear multiple times a day. And, you know, of course, the next step is to go into the numbness to be like, well, where did you come from?
Mhm. And
And this is
numbness
what.
is a sensation too, you know?
Yes, absolutely. It's a feeling, and I think people think that if they feel numb, they're not feeling.
Mm. Yeah.
And then they kind of vilify themselves then by saying, I can't feel anything. It's like, no, no, you are feeling something.
You're actually feeling
You're
a lot, to the point that it might be, too much at this moment. And so there's the disconnect. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And you were speaking a little bit about there this the energy or the connection, intimacy,
Mhm.
the kind of this kind of this journey of intimacy, what it looks like. And I know a lot of people, even when I mention Tantra to people, they immediately go, oh, tantric sex.
Mm.
And it goes so much more beyond that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And I'd love to just clarify that for people that are listening.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that's it's a whole topic, but so yeah, I mean, the word, to start, maybe to break it down, tantra, Tan and Tra, tantra. Like I said, there's loads of different definitions of it, but one of them is to weave, another is to illuminate or to expand. And the tantras originally were ancient texts. So they're texts in which some of this knowledge is written down in. And essentially, that idea of the knowledge being knowledge that illuminates or expands, what it's speaking to is the illumination or expansion of consciousness, of awareness. And so it's practices that build our self-awareness ultimately through that development of sensitivity, through coming into deeper relationship with the natural world, with our bodies, with everything, not just, whatever your mind might go to when you hear that word. Um,
Mm.
and it's really starting to see life as an opportunity to come into relationship and to be in relationship with all of these things, like we've just been speaking about. And it's also, there's another definition of it, which is the science of energy management, which kind of gives another angle on it, which is where we start to learn to be a bit more masterful and a little bit more intentional about where we allow our energy to go. And this is what certain Kriya practices and meditation and pranayama practices help us to learn to do, is to kind of harness that flow of prana or energy in our body. And we're not just controlling it for the sake of having control over it. We're learning how to master it so that we can kind of be more intentional, like I said, with where it's going. And so that means then, on some level, we become more, I don't like the word more powerful, because that can also be taken a lot out of context as well, but it is more embodied, more able to hold the energy that we're naturally living within, and more able to harness it and direct it to where it is we want to go. And like, you could, if you get to that point, you can really direct it wherever you want to go. And it's just that there's certain avenues down which people have taken it over the years that um have been misconstrued, and that it doesn't necessarily mean that that's all there is. It's one way that energy can be used, but there's many other ways. And generating the self-awareness and continually practicing, and your daily sadhana to build the tapas, to build that fire of awareness, is kind of what the traditional practices would aim to kind of foster more so, is the relationship to sadhana and relationship to the ground of your being, basically the part of you that is unwaveringly calm and steady and grounded at all times. um, because from there we can again, like I said, direct our energy and our attention at will. And if we know anything today, like, our attention is the greatest currency that we have
Mm.
to spend. How many hours you spend scrolling on smartphones and all that kind of thing. And the currency that people are working in now is actually attention. And so if we have some form of mastery or ability to harness our own attention and understand the workings of our mind, which again the yoga speaks about in depth, yoga being the stilling of the fluctuations of the mind. It's the first yoga sutra, maybe the second one, can't remember. Second one. um if we can do that, then it brings us a sense of empowerment that we might not receive from any other place and from other teachings or other kind of avenues. And so it's empowerment, but it's also self-responsibility, and the expansion and the illumination and the awareness then that is comes along with all of those things. So that's
Yeah.
one way of explaining it. There's so many ways to think about it.
I love it though. I love how you've spoken into that there. It really resonates with me anyway. And I'm it's so beautiful to have clarification around that, because I think there, like I say, there's a kind of misconception about the kind of the teachings and how pure and beautiful they can be in so many ways. I love, there's two things that actually that you were speaking about that really resonated with me. This awareness. Um, and I recorded a podcast with Dara Stewart a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking into kind of his men's work, and it was such a beautiful conversation. And he spoke into to this uh, this kind of awareness of being present. And he sees in some of the men that he works with, it's like, are you actually present for your partner? Are you present for your children? Are you present for your friends? But as you speak into the awareness piece, I almost see it like synonymous with
Yeah.
presence. And, you know, but I suppose it all starts with self. Are you aware of self? Are you present with self
Hmm.
as well as all the people around
Yeah.
you? You know?
Obviously, that's where it starts. Yeah. If we can't be present with ourselves, we can't bring that to other people. So yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose nowadays, because we have our smartphones, like if you get onto the train or you're on public transport or anything like that, and you just see people in the world, even people walking down the street are on their phone. They're not even looking, they're walking into each other going by.
Mm.
It's almost like the awareness and the presence has completely been stripped away, even in the day to day. And I suppose, how are we going to notice the mundane as being magical if we're not present to actually see it as we walk by?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. It's so powerful, like when you think about it. Can I put my phone in my pocket and actually just walk down the street, listen to the birds, the song, just how beautiful that is, and just be present with the what's happening around you.
Mm.
Like I love through my shamanic training, I think that the universe sends me messages every minute of the day. So actually, if I'm looking for a message, I'll be like, okay, where's my white feathers? Where's this? Where's that? I know that like there's little key signs from the universe that that's magic to me when I see a little white
Mm.
feather. That's a sign from the universe to me that something is right. And but it's wild because actually, if you begin to look around you, even to look at signs that you walk by, all of the synchronicities in the world around us, I feel when you start to lean into that as something as simple as just being present in the moment, there's so much that we can actually glean from the world. You know?
Exactly. Like it's all there. Everything we need is there, you know? And
Yeah.
yeah, it's mad how we've just again been so conditioned to look outside of ourselves, and the senses being so kind of externalized. Like I mentioned, like another stage of practice within yoga is pratyahara, which is the withdrawal of the senses, where you essentially just kind of move in, and you stop being so distracted by sound and sight and smell and touch and taste, and it's just what's left is just pure
Mm.
awareness. It's just beingness.
Wow, that's amazing. That is amazing. Even just contemplating that for a moment, I'm like, wow. Like to have no stimulation whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like, because I suppose, yeah, even walking around and looking at the signs and the flowers and all the bits and pieces, you are being stimulated, aren't you?
You're still going out. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's so cool.
Mm.
That's something I'm going to take home with me tonight now.
Or you can go to the cave instead.
Yeah.
Like,
Do you know what? Sometimes I do. Do you ever feel like when I started going on a journey, because I was part of the Buddhist community for a very long time, I still go to the Buddhist center in Dublin, and I love the Buddhist teachings. I do a lot with regard to mantra within the Hindu tradition, and I kind of just love the world and the teachings and everything that kind of goes on in all these different spiritual practices. But there was definitely a part at the beginning when I started leaning deeply into my meditative practice. It used to bring me such a state of bliss when I initially got past the fact that I couldn't sit still for 30 seconds. um, that there was times when I was like, I'd love to go and live in a cave.
yeah, I know. But that's also the thing with these teachings as well, is that it's, well, when you look at like the Yoga Sutras, for example, like it was intentionally written for what's called householders, which are people who have jobs and families and relationships and who want to live in the world, and who know that, you know, the renunciate path, which was what would happen when the sages go off into a cave and like take a vow, and that would be considered the renunciate path. Whereas the Yoga Sutra text is more of a kind of a manual for everyday people who have all of these daily challenges and things that they need to navigate, you know.
Mm,
Which I just think is really kind of refreshing to hear as well. It's like it doesn't have to be that for it to be yoga.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and you don't have to kind of renounce everything and leave and pack up your whole house.
worldly possessions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's really about how can we come back again, like that being in relationship piece is so key, because if you're in a cave, you can't be in a relationship with anyone else or anything else, or and I mean, I'm constantly learning this as well. Like, this is an ongoing journey for me to learn all of these things. So yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think you're so right. Like I think there's so much we can learn going inward on our journey as well. But there definitely are wounds in the body and lessons to be learned in relation to other people, you know.
Mhm.
And I love kind of taking all the wisdom and the knowledge and applying it to our very human lives on the day to day. So we still have to go out and buy our shopping. We still have to do the bits and pieces. We still have to do the dishes.
Yeah.
And how can we apply all these gorgeous teachings? Because I do think that our soul, and this is what my belief is anyway, that we chose to be here with these gorgeous souls that are around us to learn the lessons
Mhm.
that we came to do. Um, and even for so much of my life, I was fleeing, I was going to other countries, and I learned lots of lessons being away. But it's so powerful being back on the Irish land, like you talk about.
Mhm.
And even going to your Kirtan sessions and actually hearing you speak Gaelga. And I was at the talk by Macon last week, speaking into the goddess energy, the goddess within the Irish lands. And he spoke into like the sacred wells and the sacred trees and the cairns. And oh, it was just so beautiful to hear about the tradition of the land. But I love that he was kind of speaking into the essence of the goddess that lies within the Irish lands.
Mm.
And um, I'd love to kind of I love that you're kind of on a journey with connecting with the Irish land, like you were saying, after your time away in India.
Yeah.
What are you kind of what are you learning? And like, even hearing you speak Gaelic, and something resonates deeply within me, and I'm hearing more and more people do it. And I know that you've an offering coming up in the coming days, a morning practice with pranayama and mantra, and it's bilingual. And that was one thing that really touched me with Macon last week. He spoke so he just ebbed and flowed between Gaelga and English, and I was like, this is beautiful. It was just so powerful.
Yeah. Sprálam Mancon.
Yeah, I know, it was wild. And so, how are you going on your journey with everything? And tell me a little bit about these kind of offerings that are coming up for you.
Yeah. So I suppose connecting in with Sanskrit a little bit through the mantra work.
Mm,
I learned a lot about the energy of that language, and like the kind of the fact that the words hold such frequency and power in and of themselves. They're prayers, essentially, most of the mantras that we chant. And it's not just that you have the words and the sounds that you're speaking, it's also the energy that is carried in the words and in the syllables of the Sanskrit alphabet. um and again, then, kind of coming back and trying to apply that to my knowledge of Irish, which had been there since I was much, much younger, and I kind of took it for granted for a long time. Um, and I started to then connect with the kind of sacred sites in Ireland, and just, develop a relationship with them, come into connection with them in subtle ways, not in any big kind of overtly performative ways, but just kind of in my own small meditative ways. And building that sense of connection, and the language then that was already there, it just made sense to me that I was like, I need to like start teaching a little bit more in Irish if I can, because this language holds a lot of magic as well, and maybe even magic that we're not really even aware of yet. But I feel like it does feel like more and more people are starting anyway to kind of recognize that, and to even just be curious about what it might hold, and how to kind of reconnect with her. Um, and I think as we again reconnect with the importance of having our native culture and land and language behind us as a people, as things in the world become even more and more crazy, and there's that kind of recognition of colonization and the damage that did, and the kind of the rupture that is there, especially in the north, and that kind of there's a rupture, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of grief there around the language. And I do get a lot of people speaking to me about that as well, about how, you know, they wish they could speak it, and people get very emotional when they kind of say these things, because you can feel that there is a genuine longing, and it creates, I feel like it creates a sense of disconnect from home and from a sense of belonging, to not have that connection. And maybe on a subtle level, that maybe that's what a lot of Irish people are struggling with, is like a sense of disconnect from the land. And well, even Mancon in some of his books, he mentions about the link between the language and the landscape, and how, you know, even if you look at the most original form of Irish was Ogham, which is the language of trees. So every letter in the Ogham alphabet is based on it is a tree essentially. So the Irish language is based in the landscape, and the earliest forms of it came literally from the land itself. And so to be disconnected from the language means we're also on some level disconnected from the land. And I feel as more and more people
Mm.
reconnect to land, and by like naturally then just start to gravitate back in the direction of the language, and people are, you know, picking it up left, right, and center. It's amazing. um but it feels like a natural progression that's happening, where it can't not start to reveal itself, in the same way that, you know, Sanskrit mantras revealed themselves to the ancient rishis, who went deep into meditation on the land at these particular sites, and received that information and received those sounds. um I feel like there might be something like that is available to us in Ireland as well, if we are to kind of apply the right knowledge to it and the right approach.
I love that. I've started learning it again on my Duolingo app, but I think I need to go a bit deeper. It's not getting me very far very quick, in all honesty.
There.
But I love what you were speaking about with regard to sound
Mm.
and the vibrational energy. Obviously, there's lots and lots of more access to sound healing now, and the vibrational energy of how it affects us on a cellular level. And you know, just to even just loop back to with regard to the chanting of mantra and the sound and the vibrational energy in each of these words. So I've spoken about mantra in so many of the podcast episodes. Actually, it's something that has literally, like, I can't even describe to you, it has changed my life. Once you start to lean into it. And several years ago I started mantra, and oh my god, it rattled my world very rapidly. And it has been a pivotal part of my journey. And I love what you were talking about with regard to the direction in which we channel energy. And I know that we talk a lot about kind of manifestation these days, and people are like, I want to manifest this, that, and the other. But I find that actually being able to go on a journey with mantra and the energy of the kind of these beautiful ascended beings that we're tapping into, um, uh, I've been able to kind of channel energy into my healing and to being the best healer that I can be, but also into creating the most abundant, even like the word abundant. Sometimes I'm a bit like, oh, it's so overused these days. But actually, it can really change your life when the flow of energy begins to move through you in a positive, directed way.
Mhm.
And I don't think I've actually spoken very clearly about what mantra is in any of my episodes. So I'd love for you to talk about what the essence of what mantra is. What are we tapping into? What is mantra? And I suppose, how do you harness that within your journey with Kirtan?
Mm. Yeah, amazing. So, like, if you think of the word tantra, it has a similar root. So, the mantra, the tra is the same root, but man at the beginning, it stems from manas, which in Sanskrit is the Sanskrit word for mind. And so, instead of just a tool for illumination, it's a tool for illumination of the mind. And so, this is the way that we work with mantra. It's a healing tool for the mind. Ayurveda says that as well, because it's harnessing energy in a particular direction. And I like to think of mantras sometimes as like passwords or codes, like keys to kind of unlock certain energy or frequency within the mind. Um, and to grant us access into that. And again, every mantra kind of holds that body of wisdom that it came with, the Shakti that is held within each mantra. And as you chant it, you kind of build a relationship with that Shakti, so that you can then draw from that energy, that, that field of energy that particular mantra holds. And generally in this tradition, we'd work with one mantra for a good long period of time, where you'd kind of have that as your mantra for maybe a couple of years even. And so you would really really just build a relationship, not even with like the history of it, although you can absolutely look into like where it comes from and all that, but it's just the energy of it. And that
Mm.
requires that we kind of get out of our mind, ironically, and just kind of trust the energy that's held in it. um and so that's, it's there's a difference as well, just to say, between a mantra and an affirmation. uh,
Yes, I was literally just about to say that, so I'm so glad.
Yeah, because that's it's like affirmations are beautiful, and they're very very powerful when you use them in the right way. But when you're talking about mantra from like a traditional yogic perspective, it's a very different thing. It's like I was saying, the kind of code to unlock that very particular expression of Shakti that is held within that mantra. Um, and so it's not just kind of thrown around willy nilly to be like, oh, just do that one and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
It's a lot more of an intentional practice that we try at the very least to engage with when we work with them. um,
Mm.
and again, it works in a similar way, I suppose, to affirmation in the kind of neuroscience side of things, but it's also more than that, because it is just kind of an energetic thing.
Yes, yeah. And when you began to practice mantra for the first time, did you get a mantra given to you or provided to you by a teacher?
Not yet, no. I would love that to
Yes,
happen,
yeah.
but I have ones
Yes.
that were recommended by kind of teachers who wouldn't have that kind of authority, um there's
Yes.
one, yeah, there is one that I kind of is constantly there with me, and it's even when even when I'm not really trying to practice that one, sometimes it just comes in because it's there. I don't know.
Yeah. You're sitting within the energy of it now for so long.
Yeah, I suppose, but I mean, it's not something that I'm in a rush to get to any destination with, because I really just
Yeah.
that it's, the timing of these things is so important as well. uh,
Yes.
and I
Yeah.
really trust that particular mantras are, you know come into our lives at different times for different reasons as well. So we might that
Yes.
one for me is still there. There's been times where I'm like, I want a new one. Come on, I need it. I want to try and work with a new one now. And I try, and then it's like, no, just keep using this one now for another while. So, you can't really. It's like they have a little life of their own almost. And
Yeah.
mm,
It's so funny. My gorgeous mentor, who I received my mantra from. I remember a couple of months in, I was like, there's so much stuff going on in my life. I feel like the world is rattling down around me. I was like, can we change this? I feel very sticky. And they're like, that's the whole point. You need to keep going. This is something that's going to be with you for your lifetime.
yeah,
So you better settle into it. And I was like, oh, it was just the dawning on of me with regard to it was the human part of me that was trying to like wriggle away from some of the stickiness that it was allowing me or gifting me to see.
exactly. And like if you engage in regular sadhana, daily practice, it's not all lovely, and that's not the point as well. It's not supposed to just make you feel lovely all the time.
Yeah.
Intentional, I spoke about this today actually. I did a post on tapas, which is this kind of intentional challenge or heat that we generate through our practice. And it's when we commit to something really, and it's, tapas is, it's often misunderstood as just heat or like sweat in like the modern yoga world, but it's actually the heat and the friction of our own resistance. So when we've committed to do a certain practice every day for a certain amount of time, obviously there's going to be days where we really don't want to do it, and we're just like, oh, come on, I just don't want to. That's the tapas, that's the resistance to lean into. And that friction, that resistance, is what creates a spark. And the spark then is what creates the heat. The heat creates the flame, and then the flame burns through the limitation. of whatever we're trying to work with to get past. And that is kind of the tantric way of working with any practice that you're committed to is through generating a little bit more tapas. And like tapas again is like this field of heat or friction or energy that has a kind of an edginess to it. It's a little bit edgy, and when you've met that point in your practice, if you're, whether it's a meditation, you're like, I don't want to sit for half an hour, but you do anyway, and it's, you meet that edge and you always expand past it. And again, that word tantra meaning to expand, or one way of understanding it as well is to expand. So it's the intentional leaning into our own limitation and meeting that edge with a little bit of, I don't know, commitment.
Yes, yeah. And that is what I will 100% like I, I 100% agree with this with regard to, if you're reaching points on your meditation journey, sit in the stickiness, sit in the discomfort. There's been days and sometimes weeks where I sit down and literally I get a minute in and I'm like, oh, like you're wriggling around, you're trying to jump up. And that is the point in which the energy is shifting. It's the point of breakthrough. So I love that you've highlighted that, because I get asked that question quite frequently with people that are on a journey with their meditation. And yeah, it's the expansion point. So I love that you've spoken into that. So thank you so much. And Jenny, just as we're finishing up, can we just speak into kind of how people can access this kind of wisdom that you have, your teachings? I know I've like the minute you release your kirtans, I sign up immediately, because I just, for anybody listening, they're the most magical couple of hours of your life. I look forward to them. I texted one of my friends last week. I was like, why doesn't Jenny do kirtan every week? This should be a regular in my life on Friday nights. So they're very magic and very special. So thank you.
Thank you.
But what other offerings are you cultivating at the moment? I see that you've kind of highlighted a couple of things that are coming up in the coming weeks and months, and it would be so lovely for people to be able to access your wisdom.
Yeah, so I have, firstly, I don't know when this podcast is going to go out, but I have a course starting this Saturday, so I don't know if it'll be too late. But that one is it's a 5-month online container, so there's one weekend a month. It's called Ground of Being, and it's a Tantra Katha 50-hour continued education program for yoga teachers or people who just practice yoga a lot. You don't have to be a teacher to do it, but yeah, it's geared towards coming into relationship with that part of ourselves that I was speaking about, the ground of our being, that part that is unchanging and unwavering and always there to return to. So yeah, that is it's going to be online, so the recordings will be available. So if you do hear this after the fact, you can always reach out and just inquire. And then I have a sadhana group starting on Monday as well. I try to do the online morning meditation groups once every 2 months ish. They seem to happen at once every 2 months. I was trying to do it monthly, but I think every 2 months is enough. So they happen regularly enough as well. And then the kirtan sessions I do in Dublin, again, usually every second month. And Sligo I've been doing them in as well, because I'm based in the west at the moment. So um
Lovely.
yeah, Dublin, Sligo, and then I post everything I'm sharing on Instagram anyway, any events that I have, so you can just follow me on
Lovely. And so it's Jenny Bean, isn't it,
there.
on Instagram?
Yeah.
Oh, lovely, lovely. And yeah, so we'll put little links in the show notes for people to be able to access your teachings and your offerings, which is amazing. Or anybody can reach out on Instagram to myself or Jenny if they'd like to go on a bit of an adventure. And I can tell you from my experience of Jenny's beautiful work, you will absolutely not be disappointed. It's a wonderful journey of expansion. So thank you so much. And Jenny, thanks so much for coming to talk to us. It's been so beautiful to hear your wisdom about things. There's a lovely energy of stability or grounding or connection to the land. Actually, when you speak, there's a lovely grounded energy when we talk about these things, and hopefully everybody that's listening can kind of get that sense as well. So I'm so grateful to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.